uh, born to farm families, each of them, and at least one of their parents was had immigrated from Norway, and they each had at least 5 siblings.
Really?
And amongst the potential siblings, my dad, his mom, had triplets shortly at or after him that did not make it. And well, how in the world in those days would you know to make it? Anderson, and I don't know about much about my great grandfather. And my mom's family, the Holland side, came across in 1883 in that big chest, Carrie Hayland, Haalund, and I would guess that's another way of pronouncing and spelling Holland, which it ended up being, and which I noticed that the mayor of Paris, Oland, and it spells it Holland.
So you actually identify yourself as French then?
Not Norwegian?
No, no freaking way.
Wasn't that the connection?
That was delightful, and we had a big yard and trees, so we had no problems playing pirates and creating tree houses.
Mm-hmm.
In every one of my grandparents, each of them, and our backyard, and a couple of different uncles had tree houses that we built out of scrap around the farm.
And that was where?
In the various places,
No, I mean what town?
Ames and Roland, and these are the farm houses, and Thompson, Iowa. Somewhere he got aligned out with the idea that, and as well as a good idea, he was a successful civil engineer and went to Iowa State off and on during the war years, and he got out. That was dictated by the economy, and got out in time to see some action in the Philippines.
What was his, so he was a civil engineer in the Army or
Yeah, that was the Army. And
Army Corps of Engineers? Well, no.
yeah,
Okay.
I don't know. The Joyce's dad, my wife, was also a civil engineer, and also they were in the same class and used to double date. Oh, they were just a hoot. I don't remember ever being so frustrated with them that, and I was the oldest, I could have easily taken a poke at them.
Mm-hmm.
And no pain, but I don't think it ever got to be that directional.
So what were they like then?
Uh,
What was Tom like?
Tom he did well in Aero E and electrical engineering, and he also liked the outdoors, and we did a lot of camping gigs for weekends or several days. And the same with Nance, only she was not engineering oriented, she was journalism. I'm sure that when I graduated from Iowa State, Dad had two mixed thoughts. Number one, he'd graduated, I had graduated, and on the same day, I went down to Des Moines to the the recruiting stations for the various military offices. And when I drove back out of Des Moines, I missed my turn, and I rode, instead of coming back on 7th Avenue or 14th Street in Des Moines, I went over about a mile and a half further, and I drove right past the DO school. Well, that caused me to pay attention and learn a little about that. And lo and behold, I got accepted in that same visit, but I needed a year of organic chemistry. The Drake University in Des Moines, just the president of the DO school just pointed out that you could get a year's worth of organic chemistry in summer school. And I commenced to do well and get straight A's, and that was uncommon for my dad to see. At any rate. That was pursuing a thing that I had known about in my character, about the outdoors, and I knew a grad student that had some activity to do for the government in Alaska, and I got hooked in to that one. And
What year was that?
58.
So you were.
Uh,
It was
yeah.
after school, or I mean, it was
It-
before
a
med
year.
school, or
Yeah, it was a year after I graduated from high school in 57, spent 57, 58 going to school at Iowa State, and that was a summer job. The second round of Alaska was in it responding to the encouragement of the Iowa State Office of whatever grades.
oh, you went there twice.
Yeah. And this time I went early in the summer and that would have been 59, early in the summer, and got home just in time for Thanksgiving, which would have just been at the ending of the first quarter of that year. And
And what did you do there?
any of us stateside fellows were that I knew of we were making the connect between what we saw in fisheries, and by being fisheries you were loose on the soil and in the forest, and the government issued a 30-06. At any rate, one time I was going up and I went into one observation post beside it was maybe 50 feet through trees and brush. Now, remember, we are in that's rainforest kind of country, and when I got up to the river, I made my observation and turned around, and about halfway back, I had waked up a bear, and I had been carrying my rifle on across my back very nonchalantly and can't get it off in time, but that bear huffed and roared and charged right on by. He wasn't looking for a meal out of Joe as much as he'd just been alerted and alarmed. I figured that out, and within about 50 more feet down that trail, a chipmunk came around from the tree and started chewing my ass out, and he was vaporized reflexly. That thought had been a long time ago, historically speaking, and I tried to be careful, acting with as good information as I could accumulate, and the efforts that I took were always based on that kind of finding, and that was all fun.
Were there ever any moments that you were just ungodly concerned?
Oh, if you got ungodly concerned, you were already trying to help their position with God. You're always a modicum of that concern, and when it goes to pieces, that was, quote, part of the plan. Yeah, my first date with Joyce was not a date. It was in the med school. There were a number of medical doctor fraternities. There were 4 in our school, and one of them had thrown a rush party, and Joyce had a girlfriend that she and 4 others had rented a big house, and she was single, and they invited her as well as a whole bunch of others. And we just got to jacking and hitting it off, and when it had come to another date to schedule, and I thought my roommate and I would come up to an Iowa State game. I think my roommate had played for Bud Wilkinson in Oklahoma, and the two of us would have dates, and we would come up and eat lunch at the folks' house and then go to the game, which we did. And when I called Dad initially, he got all exclamated and kind of halfway excited, and Joyce Pullen, did you say? That couldn't be Jim Pullen's daughter. And that was so. And they'd been double dating. And
So
and
you,
they were
You didn't know her before then.
no. And that was fun. We lived, after we got married, I think, we had previously, Joyce had lived in that house with the gals, and I had lived at that fraternity house. And then when we got married, we moved into what it turned out to be an old chicken coop. And they had modernized it, quote, modernized, during the war to accommodate servicemen in cheaply. And the room, the width had to be 34, 68, 70 inches at the most, and twice that long. It was a lovely place, but Joyce had got acquainted with one of my classmates' wife, and the apartment house next to him, I guess it was a duplex, was coming up available, and it was going to rent for not a heck of a lot more, and we moved. Oh yeah, after Des Moines, but we spent lovely 3 years there, and it squeezed in an internship of 1 year out in Portland.
Oregon?
Yeah, and then we moved to Tulsa, and that was a fun place to be with all the other house staff and residents. And after Tulsa, we took a job as a practicing physician in Michigan at a little town called Carson City. And it's about an hour straight north of Lansing. And they had still a house staff training program, and they were big enough. And to this day, I think they have 8 interns, and that was a treat. And then
So wait, how long were you there?
Oh, half a year.
Okay.
If I'd have kept a winter coat, we might not have moved. In Michigan, an hour north of Lansing, gets pretty darn cold. And all the darn snow. At any rate, the folks that had been talking to me about recruiting Joe to go to Oklahoma City got a hold of me at the right time and during one of those cold snaps, and we moved to Oklahoma City. Oh, any of them, at the right season, are dandy. I don't like to think that I could be dandy working and living in a desert or working and living at the North Pole, but almost any time in between. And Joyce was there to carry a lot of the grumbly freight that you bring home. That night that she was born, it was my stint to serve as the medicine rep that night in the hospital, and we always stayed in the hospital, covering anything that was internal medicine. Well, Joyce came by, and it sounded like she was just coming in to have coffee and a piece of cake. And as it turned out, she was getting a little tumpy lumps. And I called to get her accommodated into the system, and her attending doc was not as hasty as Nancy was. So I am in there doing the doctor deliver thing, and the doc didn't ever show up, and that was the second delivery the intern had ever seen. So I just did it, and now I may have knotted up her umbilical cord too tight, but our first airplane was a single, and then our second was a twin engine version of the single.
Wait, before you get there, how did that conversation go with Joyce? I think I'd like to buy an airplane.
I don't have any recollections of that.
Seriously?
Oh my. But 12 years into it, I do remember I won a dining room table
Instead of
an airplane. Well, by then we'd been doing well, and we did both.
so
And
you get a first plane. How much does a plane cost at that point?
that airplane list price was 12 grand. That was way back when fuel for the airplane was a heck of a lot cheaper. I guess everything's relative to the market, but
And what did you do with it? Just tinkered around, or did you actually go on trips with it? The first one?
we did transcontinental, and by the third airplane, we had full de-icing gear and radar for thunderstorms. So we just, we could go into what looked naughty on the ground, and it turned out okay.
I want to get back to that, but wasn't there a moment or two when you messed with Tom and there was Tom and there was a thunderstorm and
Oh my. There was my brother Tom. We had, the folks still lived up in Ames, and Tom was still single. And we flew out to meet him in Ames. My sis, Aunt Nancy, was with us. And when the holiday got done, we were going to fly back home to Portland. And Tom thought he'd like to do that, up over the mountains, etc. If you remember, all the talk was about all of that you don't fly except in bright sunny days. And it got to where over Pierce, South Dakota, westbound, we're at 10 or 12,000 feet, and in the cloud banks solid. And then, and I was aware of the icing that had been forecast and et cetera. And I was doing a chart and Tom was drifting off, holding his cup of coffee. And
was he in the co-pilot seat?
he was in the right front. And there was a loud kabang, big time kabang. If it's gonna be loud enough to be overheard above the engines, you know it's loud. And then I heard another kabang from the other side. And I already, that's what I was looking for. And I woke him up. It said, "What the hell was that?" And that was what he echoed. He says, "There had to be at least 2 of those kabangs. Are we missing any parts?" And then bang, bang, bang. And once I turned on the prop de-ice, it quit, and that was the end of me traumatizing Tom. And we drove around a few places, and I'm not sure what the issue was about why we needed to get off the street. And Jules had decided we needed to be off the street, and I agreed, and we just turned aggressively into a guy's driveway. Well, it had the curb all the way up his driveway out to the street. And she just turned and hit that curb, and her legs and bottom went way up in the air, as well as mine. And I heard it first, Lord, out of Iggy's mouth. Holy shit, what was that?